So you sit there saying to yourself, I've seen every Godzilla movie. I've seen them all. I've seen Godzilla vs. Batra, Godzilla vs. V-Ran, Godzilla vs. Death Kappa. Well, think again, because I guarantee you that there are more unmade Godzilla movies out there than could possibly ever exist in this timeline. So grab your popcorn, grab your sodas, because we are locking ourselves in for one hell of a rabbit hole as we look at the plots and backgrounds to the unmade Godzilla films.
星を見たいだけなのにこちら
Now this will not cover every single Godzilla film that is unmade in existence, because so many of them exist solely as a title and nothing else. The information that we do have on a lot of these comes from scripts that are untranslated or brought over in synopsises. So there is a bit of extrapolation that we have to do to figure out why these were canceled and what was going to go on in these movies to begin with. But trust me, there are some freakishly bizarre concepts for Godzilla movies in here, and you will not be prepared for any of them. Bride of Godzilla, Mad Monster Part E, question marks? Bride of Godzilla, yes, spelled with the question mark, is one of the earliest unmade Godzilla films, being unmade in 1956, 2 years after the original Godzilla. Clearly inspired by the Frankenstein naming convention. Bride of Godzilla is about a scientist, Dr. Shida, creating a gigantic robot daughter. Oh wait, I think I misspoke, because Bride of Godzilla is apparently about Dr. Shida discovering that the Hollow Earth theory is real, and instead of Deros underneath the Earth is actually filled with kaiju. It's filled with multiple Godzilla and Anguirus's, and 2 more new kaijus. Also a race of mermaid people. And so the climactic fight scene, the big monster fight that this movie would center around, would be the robot daughter that Dr. Shida creates, fighting off kaiju from the center of the Earth. Why would you ever not make that movie? And it's during the fight with Godzilla that the robot daughter seduces the big G so that she can get some of that big D. So sorry. Or so it would seem, as the robot daughter is actually a hydrogen bomb, and she detonates herself to save Japan from Godzilla. So why would this masterpiece be canceled? Well, it didn't seem to go anywhere past a script that was put out. There's no concept art of the robot daughter, and we don't even know who would have been in this. I also streamlined a few of the events in this quick little recap here, because part of the movie has Dr. Shida falling in love with one of the mermaid people, and that's our main romantic interest. Also, the Bride of Godzilla, the robot daughter, is explicitly described as being naked when she seduces Godzilla, but is not really described with clothes on at any other point. And honestly, a nude Attack of the 50-Foot Woman is not exactly the most surprising thing that could come out of Japan. So if I had to guess why this was rejected, it was probably because it was too ridiculous in the wrong way. Giant radioactive lizards is one thing, but naked robot hydrogen bomb girls completely shatters my disbelief. Continuing on with the Monster Mash theme song, here's one that some of you might already know about, the infamous Frankenstein vs. Godzilla. And I say infamous because it seems like when it actually comes down to it, these two were never gonna face off. You see, because originally, King Kong was gonna fight Frankenstein's monster for the title, in a movie called King Kong vs. Prometheus. Prometheus not being a reference to the film, but instead being a reference to the book's original subtitle, Frankenstein, the Modern-Day Prometheus. No one in America would buy the script to King Kong vs. Prometheus. And really, no one in America should ever buy scripts to anything with the name Prometheus in it. that's getting cut. So it was eventually sold to Toho, who changed out Frankenstein's monster for Godzilla. Frankenstein vs. Godzilla would have been the follow-up match to King Kong vs. Godzilla. This time seeing Godzilla's first title defense as a hero who had to defeat an out-of-control Frankenstein's monster. But at this point, Godzilla was still a notorious heel, and he wasn't over enough to play a face. So the idea was split into 2 films. So the card was quickly changed to an opening match of Godzilla vs. Mothra, which became one of the greatest matches not to happen in Tokyo Dome. And this match would have been followed up by Frankenstein vs. Baragon. Now, I love Baragon. In fact, he's probably one of my favorite monsters in the Toho Kingdom. But it's clear that Godzilla was getting the real push here, and Frankenstein's monster was left in the dust. And yes, I did this whole segment calling him Frankenstein's monster and not Frankenstein. It's possible. Suck it, Aaron! This one's gonna be more of a footnote than anything else, but it's so weird that I think I better mention it. In an attempt to recapture the crossover success of King Kong vs. Godzilla, a sequel starring Batman was tossed around. This film would have seen the Caped Crusader going against Godzilla using his arsenal of bat-related gadgets and vehicles. No mention of Bat Godzilla repellent. Unsurprisingly, this never even made it to a real, fully fleshed out script, and it's unknown if it was ever even pitched to DC Comics. The only proof of its existence we have are 2 treatments, one by kaiju film screenwriter Shinichi Sekizawa. So I don't want to rain on everyone's parade here, but there's a good chance that one of these might be faked, or if it wasn't, I doubt that either of these were ever seriously considered. There's very, very little information on Sekizawa's treatment out there, and the alleged American one that we have makes explicit reference to Barbara Gordon, a character who would debut the same year, or depending on some of the dates, a year after the treatment was written. But really, Godzilla vs. Batman was always meant to be padding fodder in a bunch of clickbait lists and videos of top 10 never-made Godzilla films, and not a meticulously professional video that you will find only on the channel Japanophile. This is probably one of the most plausible unmade Godzilla films. Plausible in that the plot is pretty similar to what we would see 30 years later in Godzilla 2014. This would have been a co-production between Toho and Subodaya, probably better known as the company behind Ultraman. In this film, Godzilla would have been facing off against 2 alien kaiju, that being Red Moon and Erebus. That would have been Red Moon and Erebus. These 2 kaiju were to be visually distinct from each other, with the twist being that they were actually male and female of the same species. Do you see where this is going? After Red Moon and Erebus meet, they get it on. That's right, Bride of Godzilla ain't the only one to get its freak on. Erebus would have given birth to then a 3rd new kaiju, Hafu. Although I guess being a baby kaiju, this one was more like human-sized or whatever, because it gets kidnapped. Apparently it gets kidnapped and dies while the kidnappers are transporting it. The details are really vague at this part. This would cause Red Moon and Erebus to go on a rampage, total destruction, Nintendo Wii. And Godzilla would have to step in and stop them in the last 10 minutes. At the very least, that's how it seems from the plot descriptions, because Godzilla isn't mentioned until the very, very end, which is part of what makes this seem plausible. Because if you've seen Godzilla movies, you know that if you want to actually see the monster fight, you really just have to skip to that last 10-minute mark, if you're lucky. So this sounds pretty standard for a Godzilla movie. Maybe a little dark, but the final product probably would have been a fondly remembered movie. So what happened? Well, it's unclear as to how exactly things fell through between Subodaya and Toho, but the project was eventually changed into the film Daigoro and Goliath, And instead of a co-production, it would be Toho distributing and Tsuburaya handling literally everything else. It seems to me at a passing glance that they clearly had two different ideas of what they wanted the movie to be. And then when things started to seem like they were going south, Toho just left Tsuburaya holding the bag. But that's just speculation. And so, ironically, in this movie about two very different kaiju coming together and creating a new life, Tsuburaya and Toho were split apart because of it. Well, not really because of it, but it fits the narrative that I want to build here. On a more positive note, Red Moon is one of the more popular Unmade kaiju, getting plenty of fan art. So even if it's not Erebus giving it to him, he's still getting plenty sweet kaiju loving out there.
Versus mode.
This one's gonna have a lot of familiar elements to it, and some that never quite made it out of this Unmade movie. The titled space monsters refers to Ghidorah, Gigan, and Megalon, who are under the influence of a giant alien brain. In opposition to them is Godzilla and Anguirus, and special new challenger Majin Tool! See, Majin Tool, I don't actually know if I said that right. I shouted it. See, Majin Tool is an ancient statue that the alien brain tries to possess. But when it orders Gigan to cut the statue open so the brain can be placed inside himself, Majin Tool comes alive and sides with Godzilla and Anguirus. This guy was probably an answer to Daimajin, with this movie being planned not too long after the Daimajin movies spiked in popularity. But it would be an answer that was never heard. Of the three brand new kaiju introduced in Earth Defense Directive, Majin Tool is the only one never to make it to screen. Gigan, Megalon would get movies of their own, which is actually why Gigan is BFFs with Megalon. The Godzilla Tower, an important part of the Space Monsters script, would also show up in Godzilla vs. Gigan. Ultimately, this feels like a film that was too ambitious for its own good. It wanted to have 6 kaiju in total, with 3 completely new suits being made. So instead, it was broken down into 2 movies, Godzilla vs. Gigan and Godzilla vs. Megalon. And judging by the quality we got in those, I think it's safe to say that maybe that wasn't the best idea. You're not ready for this. You might think that you're ready for this, but you're not. Because if you haven't heard of this one before, then you are in for a trip. This is the big one, the most crazy one, most ambitious one, and the least unmade one, unless you count Godzilla movies that were actually made, because then they would be completely unmade. Wait, those early examples were just Godzuki compared to what we have in store here. Buckle up, strap yourself in for 2001, A Space Godzilla. A Space Godzilla begins with a little girl, Momo, finding a dying Godzilla on the shore of a beach. What could be killing Godzilla? Diabetes. Now, this part is a little bit unclear in the translation that I read, but Momo alerts science and scientists, who then cart away Godzilla's still living brain to experiment on, separate from the rest of Godzilla's body. Momo gets lost inside of said Godzilla's body while running away from the press. And it's here that Momo finds Godzilla's womb, and a child still alive. Yes, much like Godzilla 98, this Godzilla is a female Godzilla. This is a bride of Godzilla. The baby is kept alive by being transported into an artificial womb. And while it's in this womb, Momo makes friends with it by singing it a lullaby. Meanwhile, a psychic medium is called in to consult with Godzilla's harvested brain. It's through that medium that Godzilla conveys her dying wish. My name is Rozan. There has been a transmission from my homeland, Planet Godzilla. Something is happening there at this very moment. I must return to the planet at all costs. I ended up falling ill while debating whether to give birth before or after returning. I want to return to the planet Godzilla, where my husband is waiting. But alas, I no longer have the power. I am so miserable. Or in other words,
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
a plan is made to send Rozan and her child Godzilla back into space, but having no rocket that can withstand a Godzilla-sized weight, Rozan's body itself is made into a rocket to safely carry her and her baby back to planet Godzilla. Rozan and her child warp across galaxies until they are just outside of planet Godzilla's orbit. Rozan then gives birth to her child right there in space, which is described as beautiful and full of power, a natural separation. Rozan then proceeds to chew off the umbilical cord, separating herself from her child. Lacking the strength to go any further, Rozan sends her son down to planet Godzilla in search of his father. But the distress signal from planet Godzilla turns out to be a trap by the Sunurians. But the distress signal from planet Godzilla turns out to be a trap by the Sunurians. This race of erotic monsters is hell-bent on destroying every Godzilla in existence, and they've already conquered the whole planet Godzilla. The sun is captured, Rozan is pissed, and she begins her descent down to planet Godzilla as she rains atomic fire down on the Sunurians. It's during this attack that the son is rescued by his Godzilla father, Kurin. Unfortunately, during this rescue, Rozan is killed by the evil General Gamoni. Now, I think I need to read the book's description of General Gamoni for a minute here. When Gamoni became angry, flames would shoot out of her enormous breasts, and throwing knives in the shapes of swastikas would come flying out of her belly button. From her mouth, she would vomit nests of spiders. The most terrifying things of all were the talons on her feet and the long black whip she held in her hand. Now, if that isn't fucking metal, I don't know what is. Rozan's death spurs into action a once peaceful population of Godzillas into overthrowing the Sunurians, leading to a face-off between Kurin and Gamoni. After an exhaustive battle that sees Kurin and Gamoni use all of their secret techniques, as the book itself puts it, Kurin tears the head off of Gamoni and tosses it into a sea of sulfuric acid below. The story ends with Kurin looking up at the sky and saying to his son, "Your mother loved the earth. However, humans living there, how shall I say it? That intense love and hate. Why did the gods create creatures full of contradictions? When you are older, try visiting that planet once again." A Space Godzilla was set to be directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi, famous director of Hausu. Fucking Hausu! And with that in mind, it suddenly makes sense how batshit insane of a acid trip a Space Godzilla was. The concept was eventually published as a two-part story with illustrations by Shirayama Nobuyuki and Katsuhiro Otomo. Otomo is probably best known for his work on Akira, and by work on, I mean creating the fucking manga and directing the movie. A Space Godzilla is probably one of the most detailed accounts of what an unmade Godzilla film would have been, with this story mock-up even including a cast and credits sequence that gives us potential directors of photography and special effects. But somewhat unsurprisingly, most of these people are also people that worked on Hausu, with the script writer being an actress from Hausu. A Space Godzilla is out there. It takes Godzilla and makes it into an alien-centric space opera. And there's so much stuff that I just had to leave out to trim down the plot for this video. There's a wave motion virus that the Sunurians plan to psychically implant into Momo through her link with the baby Godzilla. There's an entire section of the plot that just Rozan traveling through space and getting pelted by rocks with beaks, and so much more. So I urge you to check the links in the description to read the full account on Mazer Patrol. It's a WordPress account please, they translated both parts to the A Space Godzilla story, and they are amazing if you are a Godzilla fan or a science fiction fan in general. Would this have been a good Godzilla movie? I'm not even sure if this would have ever been a Godzilla movie, considering the sheer size and ambition it clearly had. But it will always remain an interesting acid trip of a movie pitch. Godzilla has had its ups and downs, good movies and bad movies, and I'm willing to bet there's at least one movie in here that would have turned out better than some of the Godzilla movies that we actually did get. So what's your problem, Toho? Too busy lending Godzilla to high-profile sci-fi directors and writers to revive one of these scripts? Where's our Red Moon movie? Come on. Shin Godzilla did well enough, it's time to finally fund A Space Godzilla. Or just go full exploitation and finally produce that Bride of Godzilla script into a JAV title. We know you want it. At the very least, I think we can rest easy, knowing that there will always be more unmade Godzilla movies for years to come. And if you like this video and you want to see more, I would suggest checking out my video on the Spider-Man manga series for more weird Japanese oddities. Ironically, you can check out my Asian Oddities series for Japanese movie reviews. Really, I should have... That's the name of it. I'm not changing it, but you know, it's just kind of funny because I think that name would fit these two videos better. So consider pressing that subscribe button, hit that bell or whatever. You know, you guys know the drill by now.